Evening, everyone. Oh, whoa, that's loud. Evening, everyone. This is a very punctual crowd for a Tuesday night. We've still got a few more minutes, so we're just going to give it 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll kick off. Thank you. All right. As my colleague, Dr. Helen Haynes says, let's not punish the punctual, and we'll kick off. Wow, thank you all so much for coming out on a Tuesday night. I want to start by acknowledging we're a Ngunnawal country. Truly love living in this part of the world, and I've found Ngunnawal people to be so generous with their knowledge and their land. I want to acknowledge Ngunnawal elders past and present. Thank you so much to everyone who helped prepare the food. I didn't get to try everything, but there was some amazing stuff on offer, so thank you. I know some of you rushed home to quickly try and prepare or put the finishing touches on dishes, so thank you, really do appreciate it. And I've been reflecting with my team after a year which feels like an incredibly long year, where I think we've seen some real challenges in Australia when it comes to social cohesion and, I guess, different politicians and others really seeking to divide communities across the country. It's such a reminder that we actually have so much more in common than our differences, and we should actually be celebrating those differences. That makes us stronger. And I thought, looking around the room down there with people chatting, sharing food, like it really does show how powerful it is when you actually just get together, and this is what community is about. I want to acknowledge Peter Kane, MLA, is here. Thanks for coming, Peter. I don't think there's any other politicians in the room, so thanks for being here. For people who haven't been to a town hall before, who hasn't been to a town hall before? Oh wow, okay, great. Well, thanks for coming. So town halls, I guess, are part of my commitment to being accessible and accountable to Canberrans. We do quarterly town halls, and then we try and do as many mobile offices as we can where people can come down and have a sort of one-on-one and chat about things. But this is really about me giving a bit of an update. We'll often try and have a speaker highlight a specific issue and then leave a lot of time for questions at the end. There's the Slido, which you can, I don't know if there's a QR code. The questions have been submitted, and you can upvote questions so that the most popular questions get asked, but we've also got roving mics, and so we'll definitely get to as many people as we can. For those of you wondering how this is all going to work, we're going to kick off with a short presentation from Adam Haddo, who's the current National President of the Australian Institute of Architects and a really strong advocate for the value architecture brings to communities throughout Australia. I'm then going to talk about the launch of our community-driven campaign for a purpose-built multicultural centre and talk about some of the history of that and why I think it's so important for the ACT. A brief recap of what's happened in Parliament during the last couple of months. Some highlights from the year, and then really quickly sort of look forward at some of the focus areas for 2026, and then get to questions. At the end, I've also asked Claire Dubé to give a brief update on what's happening, sort of voices of groups in the ACT, I guess kind of the broader community based politics movement, because I know there has been some questions asked, and there's some interest from Canberrans about that. So with that, I'd like to welcome Adam to the stage.
Thanks, everyone. It's amazing to be here. I grew up in country Victoria. I now live in Sydney, but I've been coming to Canberra since I was born. I have family live here, so I really value coming back to Canberra. So thanks for having me. Thanks, David, for inviting me to come and speak. Maybe we can flick over the slides just to stick off. I'm going to talk relatively quickly for about 10 minutes about where I think the challenges in architecture are at the moment and how architecture can help bring communities together. Maybe next slide. I did a Churchill Fellowship about 20 years ago, and one of the big things I felt when I first became an architect was the pressure that was being put on communities from density. It was a really challenging time, and actually at one of my community events when I was talking about a project, which I'll show you in a minute, I was actually spat on by a community member. So it was quite a low point in my career. But I think it talked to the level of interest and the level of anxiousness around the built environment, because the changes to the built environment can really affect people. They can affect their sense of memory, they can affect what they think about their neighbours, they can affect how they think about themselves. So the built environment is more than just the house you live in, it's actually the kind of reciprocal of your culture and your sense of place. Next slide. We often get painted into a corner, I would say, about polar opposites. It's either one or the other. It's either houses in the suburbs or it's massive towers in the centre. And there's not a lot of discussion about what happens in the middle. Every developer almost under the sun will tell you that these two things are the things that are easy for them to do, and they are easy for them to do because they can generally control the things around them, particularly in housing out in the suburbs. New houses in the suburbs are actually pretty cheap to manufacture because we've been doing them the same way for the entire existence of Australia, really. We've just been taking a piece of land and putting a building on it. And ones in the city are relatively easy because they're stacked and they're all the same. But it's a bit in the middle. Next image. This was the project actually that I got spat on. So it's a very small project down on Glebe Harbour in Sydney, and it was proposing 2 to 4 story buildings of a group of terrace houses. And fabulously, the connection to Canberra is that actually Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Marnie did a building on this site. So it was a former industrial incinerator that existed on the site, and actually I was educated at Melbourne Uni and lived in Griffin's Newman College, so I had quite a good connection to Griffin. I had quite a good connection to this place, and it was an incredibly exciting thing that we won in a competition, and I was in my 20s, so it was kind of exciting, but I got spat on, so I was like, okay, something's got to change. Next image. So I applied for a Churchill Fellowship, and this is where I went to see how different places around the world were dealing with the challenges of density and cultural identity. How were they approaching it, and how were they dealing better with the issues that we were going to have to deal with here? Next slide. These are just a couple of happy snaps, and I like them because they talk about the value of the local, the value of the people who live here. The image on the left I love because somewhere in this place in New York, someone knows exactly where to put that banana lounge so that it's in the middle of the sun. There's a moment where they know that place better than everyone else. And on the right-hand side, I love this picture because this is why I'm an architect. the opportunity of being in this space and seeing those two little kids on the statue behind, listening to the band that's playing in Washington Square. It's a really important thing, I think, because there's a sense of comfort in those kids that they feel able to do that and be in that space by themselves and not being kind of overly watched by their parents. Next slide. But urban design is a choice. On the left-hand side is Washington, DC, and this is how they were dealing with homelessness when I was in Washington, DC, which was getting a small front-end loaner and moving the homelessness and their tents outside of the metro station in Washington DC. It was horrific. And actually, I took that photo as I was running down the escalators so I wouldn't get caught by the Metropolitan Police for taking the photo. Image on the right, I think, is one of the most fantastic photos ever took. The right-hand side of the image, that muddy pond, that's the road. The left-hand side of the image is the bike path and the walking track. Now, this is in Bogota in Colombia, where they had the highest level of violence anywhere in the world until the mayor, Enrique Peñalosa, invested in public libraries, bike paths, and schools. Those three things he invested in, and it became suddenly one of the least violent places in the world, and it was because of investment in public infrastructure and architecture. Next slide. I always think that actually one of the most important things about architecture and our built environment is actually not the buildings. It's the spaces between the buildings and the landscape. If you think of the great places you've been in the world, you might think the Opera House, you might think the Eiffel Tower, you might think the Colosseum, but actually most of the spaces are spaces that exist in your head, and it's a sense of feeling about where you've been. You wouldn't particularly say it's a particular building. On the left, I think it's another great example of an amazing public space in the centre of a European city, and funnily enough, there's a little kid climbing up that centre image, right? Same. The image on the right is 200 metres away from the image on the left. So even though they know how to do it and they've got a history of doing it, one of the most famous architects in the world, who I will rename nameless, designed that building on the right-hand side within the context of the one on the left. So we can get it wrong, okay? Just because someone says you're good doesn't mean you're necessarily good. You need to be able to understand that actually on the right, the building was the object. On the left, the public space was the object. Left is good, right's not so great. Next image. But we are horrendous in this country for doing built research. We don't do built research. We just build something and expect it's going to be good. We don't have federal funding to kind of say, let's try something and get some people involved in what it is and you know, encourage people to try living in an apartment. We were doing some work for Housing New South Wales. And one of the biggest challenges was people had been living in the same house for 30 years and didn't want to leave the house. Not because the thing that on offer wasn't necessarily going to be better, but they'd never been into an apartment ever in their life, let alone having to move into one. The first thing we did was we got a bus. We put everyone into the bus. We took them around and showed them some new housing projects that were being delivered by Housing New South Wales. We got off the bus back at the place and they said, please start tomorrow because we can now see how good it is. So it's about this opportunity of investing in research and showing people what is possible. On the left is Japan. We find it incredibly difficult to mix education and housing together. It's just kind of something that they always do in Japan. Like, why we find it so difficult that primary schools and childcare centres can't be next to housing. And on the right-hand side is the European Housing Expo in Malmö, Sweden, where they gave a piece of land to every European country, and every European country had to compete for the best building. I would like to do that with developers in Australia. I'd like to get a piece of land and say, you've all got a corner, now let's compete and see who does the best project. Next one. But context is important. So this is in, one of the things I think we are also bad at doing in Australia is going overseas and saying they do it really well, we'll just pick it up and we'll put it here. This is a photo in Holland, and it's the front window of somebody's house where they've put their pictures of their kids up. And this was all up and down the street. We don't do this in Australia. We put our pictures of our kids on our fridges, right? It's a completely different thing, a completely different way in which you relate to the street and your sense of openness and engagement with your public around you. So we can't just pick something up and plonk it. We need to think about what the context is. Next image. One of our biggest challenges in housing as Australia is we have some of the biggest houses in the world. These are queen-size mattresses next to each other to show you the average size of houses. I think it's crazy that our houses are bigger on average than those in the US. That is just unbelievable to me. I just don't understand how that is possible. And to think that we are more than 3 times larger than the average house in the UK just absolutely blows my mind. I do not understand how we have so much need for space. Bigger has become better, and I would say it's been driven by kind of a real estate investment strategy rather than housing as a human right. Housing must become a human right, not as an investment strategy. We've got a long way to do to get to that point, but... next image. Density is something that is really hard to understand. We have some of the least dense cities in the world. I showed this picture. The size of the dot means how dense you are. I showed this picture to my mum and she was like, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, Adam. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. So next slide. This puts it into context. So in each of these cities, each individual person takes up the amount of space of, in Sydney, 2 tennis courts, in Brisbane, 3.5 tennis courts, in Melbourne, 2.5 tennis courts. But in Singapore, it's 1/4 of a tennis court. Now that includes your living space, your education space, where you work, the roads, it includes everything, right? The huge variety across there. Now I'm not suggesting we need to be Singapore, that would be slightly crazy, but maybe we should be closer to maybe London, Barcelona and Paris. Maybe we should get to a density which is closer to them. Next image. So I started this thing about density is not a dirty word. Density is just a measurement, right? So we shouldn't be scared of density. Actually, density can give us good things because actually if we have a level of density, we can have more public libraries, we can have more community centres, we can have better rubbish pickups and recycling centres. We need a level of density. I grew up in a small country town of 6,000 people. We had 0 density and we had nothing, right? We didn't have a community centre. We did have a swimming pool, but that's about all we had, right? So we do need a level of density. Next image. Architecture and urban design to me is a little bit like a balanced diet. So on the left, federal government, this is what you should be eating and this is what you should be doing. On the right is my interpretation of that. We need a little bit of everything. It's not all about houses, it's not all about terrace houses, it's not all about towers, but we need a little bit of everything else. And we also desperately need public open space. Public open space should be about 30% of the land area that we develop, right? Parks, recreation centres, swimming pools, those kind of things. But we do need a bit of high-rise, a bit of mid-rise, a bit of terrace and a bit of housing. That's because people's lives change, and what used to be great, having a house with staircases in it, suddenly doesn't become so great one day when you want to live on a level surface and you want someone else to pick up your rubbish, right? So just thinking about those kind of things. Next image. These are just a couple of examples of where they're trying to do it globally. So this is in the United States. It's a bit kitsch, I would say, architecturally, but it's very American. But you can see in the top left image that vertical column thing, that's their town hall. So they built that first. They said, let's start the community with the town hall. And then you can actually see through those images, there's everything from single level houses through to 4-storey apartment buildings, all within a context of public open space. So it's actually a really good strategy for looking at density. Next image. This is the United Kingdom. This is actually developed by now King Charles. It's called Poundbury. Bottom left on the image, that is the town hall there. There's also a library in this one, and there's been some research to suggest that if you build a library in a town centre where there is a level of newness, so new people coming in, changing density, the engagement of the community will increase by 500% because you've put a library there. Now, it's a sense of understanding that you're allowed to be there. It's the kind of offer that it's made. It doesn't mean you have to go to the library. It doesn't mean you even have to borrow a book. It just means you understand that there is something there and you can go into the building. Next image. This is the same example. This is Malmö, Sweden. So you can see the difference between the English versus the Europeans. The Europeans are a little bit more avant-garde, they're a little bit more out there. But again, the difference here is they go from 1 stories up to 45 stories. There's a 45-storey tower here. They have the community infrastructure around it. And they have, this is why we can't just pick something up and put it here, and we have to think about context. But it does show that different places around the world are investing in thinking, design thinking about what the future of our cities are. Next image. There's just a couple of examples since I've come back, because I thought it's always important to think about the frame of reference from me. What did I learn on that and what was important? So no one in Australia wants to live on top of a chicken shop, okay? but everyone kind of needs to have something on the ground level that's other than housing, because housing on the ground level often isn't very good. So how do we get the relationship between ground level food and beverage, retail, all the things that we actually want, a supermarket at the ground level, a community centre, I don't know, anything, a vet. How do we get that and have the level of separation between? This is a project we looked at where we were trying to understand the relationship of acoustics between ground level and levels above. Next image. A project that I worked on in Newcastle, which is probably rounding out my Churchill Fellowship period. So on this project, I did 57 community consultation meetings. I didn't get spat on. And actually, the community have fallen in love with this project because we engaged incredibly deeply over time. It's a stage 1 of a project over 4 stages. The stage 3 has a big community centre, which is actually we're designing in conjunction with the local Aboriginal community up there. But the important thing here is there's multiple of architects. So it wasn't one architect saying, I can do everything. There was 4 architects on this project. There's 4 architects on the next stage of this project. And there's 2 public artists. You can see the public art piece on the image on the left. But it has supermarkets. It has, a bank. It has small retail shops. It has kind of the things you want to have in amongst you. Next image. It is also challenging, though, when you're getting in the cities. This is in central Sydney. Again, 4 different architects. But the reason that I think this is important is bigness doesn't mean bad. So on the right is the ground level of the project on the left. On the left, it looks incredibly dense. On the right, there's a level of intimacy to that. So intimacy is often incredibly important, that a building doesn't become a diagram. It just doesn't become one big wall. It actually has to be kind of layered and textured, and the materiality has to be embedded in it. Next image. I thought I'd show 2 Canberra jobs just because it's bring it into context. This is Canberra Brickworks. We've been working on this for 12 years now. It's been a very long process. It's only just starting. And all of the work we've been doing to date is about the heritage conservation work, and that's the only bit of construction that's started on site at the moment. It's going to have a variety of community uses. Some of those are commercial, some of them retail, some of them are proper community uses. There's a community hall in this building, but also some residential components and public open space. My one regret with this project is I think it's actually not dense enough, actually. I think it could deal with a bit more. And I think one of our big responsibilities as architects is to look forward enough, because the buildings we build will be here for 100 years and have to serve 100 years of people, not just the current generation. And sometimes we need, as community members, we need to put ourselves in the position about our kids' and what are they going to inherit, because that's the thing they're going to have. We're not wealthy enough to demolish it every 10 years and rebuild it. We need to think for the next 100 years. But interesting project, and finally starting to happen. Next image, which is probably the last one, this is just near Civic in Braddon. It's the Kogan's Village, which we've just lodged. But I think importantly about this is a mix of uses. So residential, hotel, commercial, retail, a bit of community, and a new pocket park in amongst all of that. So trying to make sure that one of the questions we ask ourselves, I think every architect should ask themselves, is what's the and? There's the bit that's given to you, the bit that the client says or the council says, the community says that they want, but what's the bit that we can give people that they never thought they could ever get? In this case, it's a new little public park. Next image. So a couple of things that I think are important. Provide a variety of housing types. So always think about, can we provide housing typologies as difference? Terraces, mid-rise, low-rise, high-rise, and individual houses. Make a reason for people to come there without having to pay for something. So if everything is a coffee shop, it's never going to work. We need to make sure there's a reason for people to come there, that they don't have to pay to be there, and sometimes that's public libraries. Sometimes that's just a really great tree in a cool spot in an open space. Make it useful, make the place useful, make it, I need to go there because, I don't know, I get my shoes, there's a little shop there that's cheap enough that I can have a cobbler there so I can get my shoe fixed. Make it essential. Supermarkets are really important because we all need to eat. So having a supermarket you can walk to, I think, is one of the most important things in life. I would love to think you never have to get into a car to ever go to a supermarket ever again in your life. It would be amazing to be able to walk there. make landscape the hero. Forget about the buildings. Make the landscape the hero. And I shouldn't say that as an architect, but make the landscape the hero. It's super, super important. Create 18-hour activities. So think about when you're looking at a project, is there enough things for me to do here over 18 hours? Because while you might be a morning person, someone else will be a night person, and you need to kind of balance those two things, because we don't want dead suburbs, because as soon as a suburb becomes dead, it becomes unsafe. We want people's eyes on the street. We want people on the street because it becomes more safe for us to walk around. And the last one is make a place that's specific to the community. So we always ask ourselves, how can we engage ourselves in a discussion with the community so that we understand what it is that makes you you, because that's the bit that will give you the cultural essence of the project and ensure it's different. We don't want it to be like everywhere else in the world. We actually want it to be there for you, by you, specific. Anyway, that's it for tonight.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Adam. I often hear from Canberrans about their desire to make sure that as Canberra grows, we don't lose the things that Canberrans love about Canberra, the bush capital feel, the access to nature, to parks. And so I think a lot of food for thought there, and hopefully things that can be taken on board by some of the planners in the ACT. A multicultural centre is something that has been promised in Canberra, I think since 2020, a purpose-built multicultural centre. We're one of the most multicultural communities in the country, and one of, I think, the few, certainly probably the only capital city that doesn't actually have a purpose-built multicultural facility that can actually cater for the very varying needs, from big event spaces, commercial kitchens where things can be prepared, to actually just little meeting spaces, potentially outdoor activities, a whole range of things. Who's doing the slides? Next slide, sorry. Through engagement with people in the multicultural community, there's a real frustration around this. This was a clear commitment, something that hasn't been delivered. If you want to go to the next slide. So a bit of a timeline. Promise in 2020, 2023, the AC government said, well, rather than doing that, we're just going to actually upgrade one of the halls at Epic, which really doesn't cut it for a range of reasons. One being no commercial kitchen, two being they're pretty tired at the best time, but also Epic is used for a whole bunch of major events, and when the handmade market or spilt milk or any of the big events rolls in, they basically close the whole thing, and it's off limits. It's also expensive, and I've heard from a bunch of people who say it's just too expensive to actually hire. So I've engaged with the AC government since their announcement on the Fitzroy Pavilion, and I guess have been engaging with people in the community, saying, well, how do we actually make this happen? Next slide, please. So, launching a petition and a community survey. This clearly needs genuine engagement. If we're going to have a facility, as Adam said, that is not just for the next 5-10 years, but is good for the next 50 years, it needs to be purpose-built. It needs input from everyone. And so I'm not tonight saying this is what we need. I'm saying we need to actually consult and come up with a plan that is going to stand the test of time. So please have a look at the survey, share it with people you think may be interested. Next slide. And I'm really keen to keep the pressure up on the government. We've seen, well, I guess if you look at the AC government, it's not like our budget is in great shape. But we've seen federal money, quite a bit of federal money at the last election, going specifically to multicultural centres in other electorates around the country. And I think if, as Canberrans, we show a desire for this, we actually have a proposal that is good to go, we can put pressure on at a federal level for the federal government to come to the table and fund something like this in the ACT. The last sitting week of the year was pretty huge. If you want to go to the next slide. The government seems to have this obsession with passing a lot of legislation in the last week, despite there being days and days where not much happens in the Senate during the year, and you kind of wonder where the legislation is, but at the end they really want to get it done. And so there were a whole bunch of bills that passed, some that didn't pass, a range of events. The environmental law reform bills ended up passing. When they were introduced, it was bad legislation. Consulting with environmental groups, they were very clear that it would actually take us backwards. I put forward 15 sort of amendments based on consultation with environmental groups, with business. The Greens did a lot of negotiation and to their credit, managed to get a range of improvements. They're still not where I think they should be to actually protect nature for future generations, but certainly a lot better than they were. Myself and a bunch of other colleagues in the Senate made a lot of fuss over the Jobs for Mates report that the government had been sitting on for a couple of years, and they finally released it last week. Really disappointingly, didn't actually embrace the majority of its recommendations. It was a really good piece of work by former Australian Public Service Commissioner Linnell Briggs, and I think would have really changed the culture in there when it comes to Jobs for Mates. The government instead has gone for sort of this non-binding framework that ministers have to abide by. So something to continue the pressure on. There was a Defence Honours Bill that actually went down. We managed to work with the Coalition and the Greens to discharge it from the notice paper. It was a terrible bill that basically stripped away the rights of Australians to nominate people who have done courageous things on the battlefield. I introduced a My Face, My Rights bill, basically a bill to ensure that Australians actually own their face and voice in the age of AI. I'm concerned we're not doing enough when it comes to artificial intelligence and actually having some safeguards in place. And I know there's some people here who have very real concerns about artificial intelligence and what it means if we just let it rip. And currently that kind of is the government's approach. They've said they're going with this light touch approach, which just doesn't square with what any of the experts me and my team have been talking to are saying that we need here in Australia and indeed around the world. What else? We launched the Parliamentary Friends of Healthy Masculinities group. Myself, Dan Repicoli, who's the Labor Special Envoy for Men and Boys, I think that's the title. Yeah, and then Aaron Violi from the Liberals, really trying to, I guess in Parliament, talk about what it is to be a man in 2025. We hear so much about toxic masculinity and all the negative things, but really trying to highlight that for boys and men out there, we have a really important role to, one, be breaking down the stigma ourselves of talking about our feelings and how we're going, but also really stepping up when it comes to dealing with family and domestic violence, given men are the overwhelming perpetrators of that. We had the tree planting, thanks to everyone who came out. The Parliamentary Friends of Housing is one of the most active groups. Fiona does a huge amount of work on that, and we had two great events on that. And then we also launched the voluntary lobbyist pass register. This is something I've been banging on a long time about. We have 2,000 what they're called in-house lobbyists in Parliament House who have sponsored passes. No one knows who they are. No one knows who gave them their passes. And you can basically turn up to security, swipe your way through and access the whole building. And these people are lobbyists. They're in there to lobby. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think that everyone should know who they are, who gave them access. And so after 3 years of the government not being interested, the opposition not being interested, we've launched a lobbyist pass register, and I think there's about 130 lobbyist passes up there. Only 13 parliamentarians have voluntarily disclosed, and I think basically just independents and one nation. No one from the Greens, Libs or Nats. We then had Senate estimates, which again was next slide, sorry. Asked a bunch of questions. A big focus was on health, so looking at the bulk billing rate to Labor's credit, they've done a huge amount of work and investment in bulk billing. As Canberrans, we know we're the lowest bulk billing jurisdiction in the country. We have the lowest GP to population ratio. And so it was great to see that nationally the bulk billing rate has gone up. It's 80%, which is great news. It's actually gone down in the ACT. And so this is something that we really do need the government to step up on. This is a federal responsibility. So tied to that, I was asking about medical school places. Labor have funded an extra 120 from the election campaign and then through a competitive tender process. And the ACT is the only jurisdiction with a medical school to miss out on that. So it doesn't seem like we're doing enough to actually address the GP shortage and bring down bulk billing rates, ensure that Canberrans can actually see the doctor. Rather than me talking, I thought we'd turn to the team, and we've actually prepared a very short, I think it's 2-minute video to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the stuff that's been happening in Parliament. Hopefully it works.
Clerk, noting that the office of President has become vacant, I move that Senator Lyons take the chair of the Senate as President.
Are there any further nominations? Senator Hanson.
I'd like to nominate David Pocock. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. I'm very flattered that you would put me forward. My focus is very much on representing people of the ACT. I would politely decline the nomination. But thank you.
I've just come out of the longest question time in the Parliament's history. Senate question time today went for 3.5 hours.
The solution is electrification. The solution is getting on with this transition and ensuring that households benefit, that our small businesses benefit from this, and that no one is left behind.
Why is your government going against the advice of the Royal Commission and making it harder to get documents? Please join me in thanking. Thank you.
Former Wallaby turned Senator David Pocock revealing he's been kicked out of the Parliament Sports Club after speaking out over its links to gambling.
Pointing out the links between the gambling lobby and Parliament and his government is actually quite an important issue.
The thing that I know you've been committed to is this release of the Briggs review, or the so-called Jobs for Mates report. Do you think your intervention forced the release earlier than scheduled?
It seems like it. It seems like the government was pretty keen to sit on this.
All of that being led by Senator Pocock, all of them filing in behind Senator Pocock.
Why didn't you answer that on notice then?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Okay, so you're taking on notice why you didn't answer a question on notice.
Now, we've got people dying on the wait list for home care packages. Myself and others have been pushing the government to at least release 20,000 now so people can actually get the support they need.
2 stars of Australian sport are teaming up today to try and tackle gambling reforms. Former rugby union player turned Senator David Pocock and cricketer Usman Khawaja are advocating for a change at a roundtable in Canberra.
The major parties are teaming up yet again to ram through bad legislation without any scrutiny. Our laws are again being changed to suit vested interests while the community loses out.
Senator Pocock pointed out that only 33%, 1 in 3 of your orders for production documents have come through.
This is more than a dinner party conversation. This is the best available climate science to actually protect the people and places we love.
Andrew McLaughlin has crossed the floor to break ranks with the rest of his party and endorse a bill that was put forward by the independent Senator David Pocock calling for greater climate action.
I think this is a really landmark question time. It's landmark because we have Labor senators actually asking questions on behalf of their state, not on behalf of the Labor Party. I stand to express my profound gratitude to the Canberrans and members of the Australian community who make my work possible. So thank you, and I really wanted to thank my team for all the work they do. They're an incredible small team who work so hard and make a lot of this possible. Then on top of that, we have a number of amazing volunteers who are in the office who are helping out on policy areas. So thank you. We really do appreciate all of your work. Looking to 2026, next slide, sorry. So going to keep pushing on integrity and transparency, keep pushing on climate. My duty of care bill got voted down by the major parties, but as you saw, Senator Andrew McLaughlin actually crossed the floor and gave this amazing speech, and he basically said, like, I think it's an incredibly conservative thing to do, to want to conserve the environment. This should be something that is not a kind of left issue. This should be on all of us to actually make decisions that are good for our long-term future. Health is going to be a big focus next year. This is something that so many Canberrans bring up with me. I know that this is an issue that obviously straddles federal and territory responsibilities. On the federal side of things,
You look at things like GPs, hospital funding, we're not getting enough. You know, there's a commitment to get up to 45% hospital funding. We're currently on 33%. We're so far off that, and Canberrans literally pay the price with extra levies, etc., as well as, you know, wait times. So health, there's the social infrastructure stuff. As part of it, things like a multicultural centre, actually getting that federal funding, housing, and then really trying to push this government on some of the bigger reform issues that I think are so critical. On housing, actually starting to treat housing like a human right rather than as an investment vehicle, looking at things like the capital gains tax discount, banning gambling advertising. Like, it's just beyond time that we get on with this as a country. The petroleum resource rent tax, we're still giving away so much gas for free. It should be criminal what we're doing because that's our gas and we should be setting ourselves up for the future. And then, you know, things on HECS, procurement. So that's sort of the rough outline, but obviously always keen for feedback. And with that, probably get into some questions. If we'll start with a Slido question. If you want to put your hand up, we've got people in. Who's there? Maya. Who else got a mic? If you'll see someone with the mic, we'll bring you a microphone. If they can be a question, that'd be great. There might be a bunch of people who want to ask questions, so if they can be sort of fairly brief and a question, I will be hanging around at the end, and the team will be at the end if you want to have more of an in-depth chat on policy or have ideas. So, who's got the Slido? Or do I have a link? Okay, sorry. Anyone? Yep, at the front here.
Thank you. Senator Pocock, the statement on superintelligence has been signed by 125,000 people, including Senator Shoebridge. It's a short statement. It says, "We call for the prohibition of the development of superintelligence, not lifted before there is, first, broad scientific consensus that it will be done safely and controllably. Second, strong public buy-in." Will you sign the statement?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I was actually asking the minister at Estimates about. I think we've dropped the ball on regulation in this area as a country. We've basically got no safeguards in place, and yeah, it's hard to accept that our existing laws are fit for purpose. That was kind of the argument, that we have existing laws and they just need to extend to artificial intelligence. So yeah, very happy to have a look at that. But that's broadly in line with what we've been hearing from experts, and we're trying to push the government on. Cheers. Maya.
Senator Pocock, thank you very much for your sharing.
Thanks for coming.
And the thing, I got the question about the community center, and I'm Ethan from Society. I'm an independent applied anthropologist, so I'm from Society for Applied Anthropology, and then we've been doing study about how to have community member to plan together for shared infrastructure. So I thought, Eden mentioned something about that, like a library or even park. So, and then I wonder, other than that, how could the safety be ensured as well when the focus is for the gathering, just in case some tragedy happen, like a fire in Hong Kong or fire in Urumqi a few years ago from happening again?
It's a good question. I think we've sort of seen and Peter can probably correct me on numbers, but I think we've seen a sort of decline in investment in public shared spaces. I think in the ACT we are lucky in that we have a lot of parklands from this sort of original design. But I think, as Adam was saying, actually designing communities from the start, looking at precincts and saying, okay, well, how do we actually build in areas where communities can not only gather, but libraries, sporting fields, all the places to hang out. And certainly been talking about it a lot in the context of the social media ban for under 16s. It's one thing to take stuff away, but what are we actually providing young people with? Places to actually just hang out and be young people. As far as safety, I guess that comes down to a whole range of factors: community cohesion, policing, all sorts of things. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people who would know a lot more about that and how you actually, I guess, work on that and build it into design.
Good afternoon, David. It's Seb Wong. Wish to ask a couple of quick questions. You know of me. In fact, I know of you when your first instance, when you have a first candidate meeting, when Zach Zalgia, you took over his place, I asked the same question. This is about the federal office under the Home Affairs, Office of Multicultural Affairs. Many years ago, even before Seth Zalgia became Assistant Manager, Minister of Multicultural Affairs, we have an office here. It's the Federal Office of Multicultural Affairs under the Home Affairs. Under his leadership, the office was removed and joined with the New South Wales office. That means in ACT, in the federal department, there's no longer an Office of Multicultural Affairs here. As you know, we have over 180 mission, many multicultural people, 1/4 of the population multicultural, and we haven't got an office here from the federal. That's one. The other one, too, I raised it some years ago. Under the Abbott's government, we have a draft Human Rights Act, the Federal Human Rights Act. It's already by Father Baden. You know of him. He's one of the great men promoting human rights in Australia.
Yeah.
That thing's still on the shelf.
Yeah.
Now, under your leadership or your influence, can you resurrect this Federal Human Rights Act? Because this is for everybody else, not just for ACT, it's for the whole of Australia.
Yes.
And you are an independent person, I'm sure you could do something like that. And thank you again for the opportunity.
No, thank you. Thank you. On the first question, I assume that was some sort of funding issue where the feds sort of palmed it off to the ACT and it just got sucked into the New South Wales one. But we can look into that for you. On the second one, Human Rights Act is so overdue. We have no overarching Human Rights Act in Australia, and the number of bills that come through Parliament where you look at them and go, gee, I wish we had a Human Rights Act, because this is actually starting to sort of eat into our sort of fundamental human rights. And I think there's really broad support in the community across a sort of very wide spectrum of political sort of views around the need to actually enshrine that in law. In the last Parliament, Josh Burns, Labor MP, chaired a committee that looked at it and actually recommended a Human Rights Act. We've been engaging with a bunch of stakeholders and really urging the government to do it. I mean, if they don't do it now, it's hard to see when they'll do it. They've got a huge supermajority in the Senate that I think would be urging them on. So certainly something that I'll continue to engage on and push them to do.
We'll just do a quick Slido question and then we'll come to this gentleman. And then can we ask for questions from some ladies too, just for a bit of gender diversity in the questions. So David, why won't the government change lobbying laws? Is it fear or conflict of interest?
I think the current system just kind of works for them, and that they don't really see anything wrong with it. You have, as I said, 2,000 in-house lobbyists. If you speak to anyone, it blew my mind. I had no idea. I kind of figured yeah, maybe it's bad, but we can't be that bad. And then when you actually compare us to the UK and the US, like these rules are so much looser. And even on the registered lobbyists register, like for third-party lobbyists, there's basically no consequences. If you break the lobbying code of conduct, the worst consequence is a 3-month break from lobbying. Like, come on. In other countries, there are civil, sometimes criminal penalties because they recognise that this is a real privilege to have access to be able to, I guess, push your view when it comes to legislation. So, I don't know. I managed to get an inquiry up in the last term, and the evidence was so compelling that Labor and the Liberals recommended another inquiry. So, you've got them when they say, let's have another inquiry. I think it's just going to come down to community support and them pushing their local MP to, one, disclose who they sponsor passes to, and then to say, let's actually tighten up the rules. Sorry. Yes.
It's working now. Can I answer now?
Go for it.
So, David Pocock, I saw that you logged onto a Newcastle mine somewhere. I remember I saw a photo of you doing that. I saw the Rising Tide group. I saw, as a rail enthusiast and a transport enthusiast and a client enthusiast, I know what blockade Australia meant. When I saw Newcastle, it's a log jam junction of trains, coal and things like that. When I saw Japan, they made the Shinkansen, new main line, not just high-speed train. And I believe if we did the Shinkansen in Australia, we would unjam the ARTC network, because right now Australian Rail Track Corporation is log jammed from Melbourne to Brisbane. Do you support a Shinkansen network? Because if we did Shinkansen, it would not only stop make the running tide less protest, get these disgusting, dirty coal trains off the tracks. And make us go to renewable energy. Do you support Shinkansen?
Who would like a fast train between Brisbane and Sydney? I mean, I remember when I first moved to Canberra, I think there was a bullet train party that ran in the local. I remember seeing them on the ballot paper. I mean, I think this is something that most Australians would get behind. It's one of those things that's been talked about for decades and no one's really just started. One of the things I have been engaging on is a fast stir train to Sydney as a start. Like, even if you could get it down to 2 hours, I reckon you'd get a lot of people. I'd certainly catch the train rather than flying. So, yes, the government actually set up the High Speed Rail Authority, and I think they're currently looking at Newcastle to Sydney. Again, I think as a country, we should be taking on some of these big, harder projects. And again, if we didn't give away a lot of our gas for free, it's probably something we could be putting money into and thinking, 50 years from now, what will this do? Because you're right, in Japan, you get on the Shinkansen, it's amazing. Obviously, they've got, I don't know, 5 times the population, but I think it's still something that we should be looking at. Hello.
Hi, I was going to talk about the lobbyists.
Yes.
I happen to know that they come under the roads from all those big buildings that were put in when the Libs and the National Party got in. They put all those big buildings around Parliament House, and they go underneath the roads and come up in the building, and then they walk around and you see them, you meet them. They never see the public, they are never scrutinised by the news either. They're invisible, essentially. Yeah. And I reckon you should just block up the rabbit holes. I mean, I remember it deliberately.
There's lots of rabbits around Parliament House at the moment.
When Labor came to power in the late 20th century, the jockeying for those buildings to get a site that had that access into Parliament House was palatable. You could feel it in the atmosphere. It was, we're going to take over this government and we're going to turn it into something that's going to make money for us and not for anybody else. It's a shocking system, and I think you could maybe work on it.
Holes.
Yeah, block up the holes. I reckon it wouldn't be a bad. We'll all come and help.
Thank you. I mean, when I talk about this, some people think I sort of just hate lobbyists, but my experience has been is that they can actually be really important in bringing to Parliament a very specific view that is based on stakeholders or industry or community groups. You want to hear those views. I just think it should be more transparent, both in terms of who has access, but then also who are ministers meeting with, and disclosing ministerial diaries, as happens in most jurisdictions in the country now, except federally. So great point there. Thank you.
We're just going to do the next Slido question, and then we'll go back to the audience. What are your thoughts on suicide prevention in Australia and mental health being in crisis and hospitals not adequately helping suicidal adults and teens and sending them home with no support?
Well, I mean, this is obviously a huge issue that cuts across so many different parts of government. Everything from having a social security system that actually people can live above the poverty line on. Our rate of job seeker at the moment is you're literally living in poverty. And we saw during the pandemic, when that was essentially doubled, people's mental health improved who were on job seeker. And so that has huge flow-on effect to our health system, to hospitals. And so this idea that we can kind of save money here, we're going to pay for it somewhere else. Yeah, I think we can and should be doing more. I think there's great community groups in the ACT working on this, frontline organisations, groups like Running for Resilience that are trying to break down some of the stigma, provide places for people to come. As to the response in hospital, I assume that part of that is just a resourcing issue, and not having the kind of specialist support and enough people in there to actually take the time with people who are really struggling and are suicidal. Certainly something I can pass on to the ACT government. Hello.
David, just in relation to lobbyist passes, I'm glad you acknowledged that actually there's some really good eggs who have lobbying passes. But I also recognise that to get one of those passes, you do have to suck up to a parliamentarian who are obviously very vehemently against outing who they have given passes to, because they have given them to bad eggs as well as good eggs. I'm just wondering, with your voluntary registrar, would you be happy for the good eggs to actually out themselves and say, I've got a pass, I'm not going to tell you who gave it to me, but I'm very happy to tell you that the Australian Health Lobby or the, St Vincent de Paul or somebody, I'm very happy to say I'm in Parliament trying to make a difference, but not actually have to say who gave them the pass. Would that be a way to get more people at least on the list and recognised?
Absolutely, and I think that's the majority of disclosures now are from people who hold passes, who I've either asked at a Senate inquiry who gave you your pass, or people have just got in touch. And in some instances said, I have a pass and this person gave it to me, or I have a pass and I won't tell you who gave it to me. So yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a spot on the website to actually do that.
Hi, David.
Hello.
Thank you for all your efforts on the environmental protection legislation, and Christopher and I will water the trees. My Slido question didn't get up top, but it focuses on the fact that after the referendum that failed, the voice referendum, we seem to have lost all momentum. Yeah. And I talked to Sam and said, can we do something nationally about maybe the minimum age of criminal responsibility? And Sam said, no, that's going to happen with the states and territories. That's not going to happen nationally. What can we do?
This has been a huge frustration after the voice. I think see sort of a different picture here in the ACT overall, but I think across the country, a vote against the Voice was not a vote against doing anything to close what is a widening gap in a whole bunch of measures. And I think we've seen Labor sort of, I don't know, frightened about doing anything, and that they really have dropped all of their commitments around truth-telling, around working towards treaty, which is, what First Nations people asked for. So I've been really frustrated. I go to all the briefings that the Melinda McCarthy, the minister, gives. They're very much focused on economic empowerment, which we've all heard before. My view is, as Canberrans, we should take this into our own hands and actually work here, and work out what we can be doing here. And I think there's in my mind, some very clear areas where we could do that, to actually ensure that we have a body in the ACT that has the ability to be genuinely consulting and representing First Nations people in the ACT when it comes to laws and other things. I think Thomas Emerson's doing some great work in the Legislative Assembly by actually legislating closing the gap targets. More broadly, talking to some people in the Ngunnawal community, one of the big issues is around land. The ACT is the only jurisdiction in the country where the traditional owners don't own any land, and so have been working with them on the Western Edge project, which I really see as part of sort of true reconciliation, actually moving forward together. So I think there are opportunities. I'm actually not expecting it from the federal government anytime soon. This is something I have raised with them a number of times. But I think as Canberrans, we can just get involved and try and show what it can and should look like.
Hi David, my name's Stephen. I'm a local Belconnen boy here, some 60 years. And my question is relating to the CSIRO experimental farm out near Everett, McKellar. My question is, what do you know about it? What's going to happen to the land? Just make a couple of comments. I'm aware that it's got endangered species, protected species living in it, on it. There's also a bit of a housing issue. We probably need some housing there, but the beauty needs to be preserved. But also I feel they used to grow wheat, and there is a big flat area out there, a very large space, ideal for growing vegetables. And the idea came to my mind that during COVID and what was the crisis when we had high fuel prices and the cost of vegetables was going through the roof. And I was thinking about all the people who were having trouble getting food, and that problem still continues today. Why don't we grow fruit and vegetables right here in this town? And why don't we deliver them, by cheap means, an army of cargo bikes or an army of electric trucks, and deliver it cheaply and affordably, if you've ever been out there, there's a huge site just waiting to grow fruit and veggies. What can you tell me?
So I've been advocating since the 2022 election, and to former Senator Zed Selger's credit, this was something that he was pushing hard, was for CSIRO, the Commonwealth, to divest of the whole CSIRO site, to actually ensure that we can build well-located housing, given how dire the need for housing is. And in this circumstance, you have the federal government's potentially selling to the territory government. That is the perfect place to actually have some sort of concession where you can build truly affordable housing and have a decent social housing component. We've seen social housing stock go backwards. And so that really has been a focus. I've met with basically every relevant minister over the last 4 years and pushed for it. They've now, I don't know if they've finalised it, but they're divesting half the site, which I I just don't think is good enough. We need to push for the whole thing. But obviously, as part of that, yes, there is parts of it that do have box gum woodland, some temperate grassland. Like that needs to be well preserved. And I think to Adam's presentation, actually build something that has all of that in mind, and is a place that Canberrans will love and want to live. As to the idea about vegetables, you're the first to raise that. I'm happy to chat more about it. I think given the pressing need for housing, there'd probably be arguments that that's better grown elsewhere, but I really do take your point. Yeah, thank you.
Hi David, it's Diana here.
Hey Diana.
Hi. I'm here tonight representing the Canberra Multicultural Community Forum, which is Canberra's peak multicultural organisation. For everybody who doesn't know, we probably have about 110 organisations that are our members. We've recently, and we will work very closely with you on the Multicultural Centre, and in fact, I think it was me who pushed the ACT government around 2016 about why we didn't have a dedicated, one of the many, many ministers that have changed over the years in the ACT government. In our new committee for the CMCF, one of the biggest things on our agenda for the coming years will be racism. We see the ominous racism that's coming our way. We've seen it in Parliament, none other than Pauline Hanson and her group of people. And we are looking to really expand here in the ACT. As much as the ACT is probably one of the better cities in Australia when it comes to racism, i.e. as not as bad as other states, but it still happens here. And so we're going to be working very hard in the coming years to confront it. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. But we also need the support at the federal level, because at the end of the day, when ministers of government or when members of parliament can stand in the Senate or in the House and make derogatory comments about a community at any time, at a will, and somehow anything to do with human rights or, the Racial Discrimination Act doesn't touch them. We need something that holds them to account. So my plea is to, at least maybe from an ACT perspective and maybe from you, where you can hopefully maybe find ways of how we make these politicians accountable for what they say, because it always, whatever happens and whatever they say, something will happen in the community, and we're sick of it, actually, so we need that support.
Well, thank you, Diana. And thank you for everything that you've done on both pushing for multiculturalism, but just generally everything you do. I think broadly when it comes to racism, the government was actually handed an anti-racism framework and plan to do exactly that, to have across the country programs that proactively are addressing racist stereotypes, different beliefs that people may have, and we haven't seen them embrace it or fund it. And so that's something that a bunch of people on the crossbench have been raising with them. In terms of what happened to the Senate, the Senate took some of the strongest action it's taken in a very, very long time to actually censure Senator Hanson and then actually essentially ban her from the Senate for a full week of 7 sitting days, which my understanding is that hasn't happened for many, many decades. So I think there's a recognition of the harm that it does, but you're right, it shouldn't be happening, and it has big sort of a rippling effect through communities across the country.
Just a thing on notice. I've been looking nationally at emergency responses and the National Emergency Management Agency looking forward. But in the ACT, I've had a very detailed look at the last 5 to 10 years. We're aware of significant difficulties with, say, ambulance at the moment, but that's only what you're hearing in public. My research has shown that there has been a lack of governance and a lack of forward planning, and I'm highly well informed that their budgets for, say, bushfire, for example, have been cut again by a quarter, and they were cut in half about 4 years ago. So the ACT emergency services are not able to come forward with that information because they're public servants. But I've prepared a paper which I'll send on to you soon, because it's getting to a point where we're getting into a critical situation, and it's mainly budget driven. I mean, you've got to make a decision between health and ambulance or health and bushfire. It's not easy, but we have a crisis coming there.
Thank you. Would love to see that when you've got it, and happy to chat to Tom Emerson and others in the Legislative Assembly. I mean, one of my concerns when you look at priorities in government is often the preventative, longer-term stuff is the first to just get cut. And we all know that sort of really bites us in the long term. So thank you. I'll happy to look into that. I know we've now been, yeah? All right.
I think there's quite a few more questions, and we also haven't got to the Slido ones yet. So I was just wondering, because we started at 5:30, whether we go to Claire and then we can sort of chat informally. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay.
We'll do that.
We're going to go to Claire, who's one of the co-founders of ProAct and got me into this politics thing. So much respect for Claire and everything she's done. She's going to give a brief update, and then I'll close, and then we'll hang around for if you've got other questions.
Thanks so much, David. I think my head's still spinning from that slide about all of the variety of things that you've been involved with, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many people to thank you, David, and the team and all the volunteers for the incredible work that you do. And certainly, as the group that endorsed David back 4 years ago, we're absolutely delighted that we have an independent in the Senate here. And we know that many people come to us and say, wouldn't it be amazing to have independents in the lower house seats as well? So I thought I'd just give you a very quick update on some of the happenings across the ACT. If you're from down south in Bean, you'll know that Jessie Price stood in the last election and came so close, and has a real chance to continue to make a difference and see politics done differently. So if you're in Bean, you may want to get involved in that campaign. If you're in the seat of Canberra, we have Voices of Canberra, which is reinvigorating, a fantastic group that will relaunch in the new year, but there's already a whole range of social events and things happening as people connect. There's actually one tomorrow night. So if you're in the seat of Canberra and would like to see politics done differently, I'd encourage you to go to the website to sign up to the mailing list, and you'll find out of a range of different ways of getting involved to get an independent in the seat of Canberra. And here in Fenner, we also, we know that there are people interested in seeing politics done differently. So in the new year, ProAct will be hosting a couple of meetings, one in Gungahlin and one in Belconnen, to gauge that kind of interest. In Fenner, we have the opportunity to also be looking not just at the federal level, but also at the territory level. Fenner maps across Yarrabee and Ginninderra, and we know there's interest in independence both at the territory level and federally. So if you'd like to get involved, please do sign up to the ProAct mailing list, and we can send out some updates closer to the time. There's also a few people here who will be hanging around, myself, also some others, Laurie and Sue, in these T-shirts as well, if you'd like to find out more. And if you're interested in Canberra, also Emily down here in the front is very involved. If we want to see politics done differently, we need to build the movement to make it happen. and I hope to see you as part of that movement. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks again for coming out on a Tuesday night. And thank you, many of you, for your support this year. I hope you all managed to get a bit of a break, and for those who don't and continue working to keep this city going through Christmas and New Year, thank you so much. I will see you all in the new year. Thank you.